To focus on what we as beekeepers should be doing this time of year. It's a very vulnerable time of year. It's the time of year where we are transitioning from winter into spring, and there's a lot in between there. Some of the topics I want to cover are false spring and the concept of false spring, what to do this time of year in your hives, what not to do this time of year in your hives, and the difference between opening and observing versus inspection. Let's start with the concept of false spring. False spring is a real thing. It's a real scientific thing that occurs in nature sometimes. I'm not suggesting that we are having a technical false spring, but for our purposes as beekeepers, I'll refer to it as false spring. It is exactly what it sounds like. It happens a lot coming out of winter and that transition into spring where the weather does get pretty volatile. This year, it's even more so because we had such a mild winter and we're all kind of being tricked into thinking that spring is here. And now because things are happening a little bit earlier, like the maples are starting to swell pretty good over here, and you might see some crocus start popping up. That doesn't mean spring is right around the corner. It's not. There's a saying that came about, don't rush the season. And that actually came from a book written by Richard E. Bonney called Hive Management, a seasonal guide for beekeepers. It's a really good book. It's really just simply written, it's easy to read, and it kind of bases everything on the seasons and how you should do things. I recommend that book. It's small too, super easy read. Things we should, as beekeepers, be doing in our hives or for our hives this time of year. Since we are being deceived into thinking that spring is here, we have to really be aware of what they have in their hive and what they need. You may have been going out to your hives all winter long and hefting them, giving a test, and they're pretty heavy, and you're probably like, wow, they're not really going down much at all. I have good weight. There is going to be literally a tipping point where it's going to be time for them to start brooding up, and we refer to it as a spring buildup, and they're going to blast through their stores, and it's going to take you by surprise. So we have to make sure that we don't drop our guard. If you have made it with your bees to this point of winter, a huge congratulations, because you most likely did everything right leading up to this point. Because if you did something wrong, your mite loads were high or virus loads were high, they probably would have petered out by now. I mean, it's not a guarantee, but we're in the third week of February. If your bees are still alive, there's a good chance you did it right. And, props to you. That being said, you don't want to drop your guard, because that means you worked really hard to get to where you're at right now. And it would be a shame if you lose your hive because of complacency. So really the only thing that you need to be doing this time of year is making sure they still have stores. Maybe you want to put some mountain camp sugar on if some hives feel a little light. You could just add it to your hives, all of your hives if you want, because it also doubles as moisture control. I have a video on mountain camp and explaining it in detail and how to do it and why it's so beneficial and why I've adopted that practice. So you want to keep up on your weights. The other thing you want to do is gather data and info. I've mentioned this in a past video, one of my first videos. This is a time of year that you're going to gather information. So you could learn and start learning how to time things, because beekeeping is all about timing. The timing is the most important ingredient to beekeeping. So you have to learn that as a new beekeeper, and you will. So you want to gather that data. There's a difference between opening and observing a hive versus inspecting a hive. And what you can do this time of year is open and observe your hive. It's perfectly acceptable to open a hive. They're not going to freeze out. The brood's not going to get chilled just by popping the top and kind of putting your head in there and taking a look at what you have going on. And the things that you want to look out for is basically your populations. And if you have heavily populated hives and you count your seams of bees and it looks like a tight kind of cluster and you got 4, 5, 6 seams of bees up top and they're all worker bees, then you most likely have a laying queen. Otherwise, it would have just petered out and it wouldn't have made it up to this point. So most likely you have a laying queen in your hive. And that is why we don't want to do a inspection, which is invasive. And you're going to start pulling frames out. You're looking for brood, you're looking for eggs. And that's where it gets risky, because you pull that brood out, it might feel nice to you, in relation to the weather. We had, regular winter a little while ago and it was chilly out, and now you're out in a nice warm day. It feels really warm. But if it's like 48, 50, 55 degrees and you don't want to keep those frames out too long, you're going to chill your brood. And also, your queen is vulnerable. If you make a mistake and you push a frame back and you crush your queen, there's nothing you can do about it, because they're not going to make a new one. There's no drones, and there's not going to be an open window for a queen to go out and mate, even if there were drones. So just more reason not to start pulling frames. That's really all we have for this time of year. It's very important to get into your hives this time of year, but there's not a lot to do and to think about. You just have to think about and make sure they have what they need to get them to the next step. Thanks for joining me, and I will see you all next time.